Hello and welcome back to Three Skulls Tavern. This is part 2 of my prepping for my One Ring solo campaign coming up on the channel. Hopefully soon as Strider mode comes out and I've got time to digest it and hopefully hit the ground running. That's what this is. Yeah. So, in my last episode, I had a look at character concepts, came up with, well... I came up with what I think is a fairly firm idea for what I want with my character, and having thought about it over the past 2 weeks, and having had a quick skim through some of the existing material that is there for the One Ring First Edition, I have thought of tweaking my concept slightly. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about before I jump into looking at adventures and things in this video. I do want to start by giving a massive spoiler warning. I'm going to be looking through all sorts of existing material. I'm going to be looking at the starter set for 2nd edition. I'm going to be looking at published adventure books for 1st edition. And that's probably it. And if you have any plans to play in any of those materials, then you probably shouldn't watch this video. Yeah, so you have been warned. That out of the way, let's have a little chat now about my character. So the character concept was to be playing a human. So yeah, I kind of narrowed it down to the human. I'm going to actually bring up my PDF viewer here so you can actually all look at it as well. Give me a second there. Let's see. There we go. So, heroic cultures, just to remind everyone, I'm going to be playing a barding. So, I'm playing a human who comes from the town of, Dale, which is just below the Lonely Mountain. They're called bardings because Bard was if you've read The Hobbit or seen the movies or whatever, Bard is the chap who kills Smaug and frees Lake Town and the surroundings of Smaug, of his his dominion over that area. And and Dale was the city at the base of the Lonely Mountain, which had been abandoned while Smaug was living there, and then it gets rebuilt, and that's effectively where I'm from. So basically like an adventuring type of human, and yet not from a sort of not one of the rangers, not one of the Dunedain, like one of Aragorn's kin, so to speak. So I'm still happy with that. I still want to play that. And in the process of looking at other adventures, as I said before, I had a look at this one here called The Laughter of Dragons. This is from a 1st edition, and it's effectively a series of connected adventures, so a campaign book really, set in and around the Lonely Mountain. And in fact, I believe that is Dale right there at the foot of the Lonely Mountain on the cover. And when looking at it, just looking at the introduction here, looking at a summary of the 6 adventures in this book, it quickly becomes apparent that, here in the second one, the company rescues the famed dwarf Balin and helps him to investigate a number of troubling events in Dale. Okay, this is interesting. Balin comes up throughout this. He's mentioned a few more times, and that was, for me, makes a lot of sense. Balin is still adventuring. When we looked at the 1st edition, we looked at the patrons in the 2nd edition core rulebook. There was mention of Balin being still wandering around and not necessarily being happy to just stay at the Lonely Mountain. Or Erebor, I guess, as the mountain's called, now that it's no longer, now that it's now back in the hands of the dwarves. And so Balin goes back and forth between sort of Rivendell. It doesn't really stop in Rivendell, I don't think, but he goes over to the Shire quite often and over to the Blue Mountains, which is where some dwarves are, over to the west of the Shire. And he also spends a lot of time in Erebor at the Lonely Mountain with his king, the dwarf who resides there. We're not exactly sure who that is at the time of 2nd edition. But anyway, there's a dwarven king, I guess, living in the under the mountain, so to speak, and that seems like quite a good patron to have, because there's already a precedent in 1st edition where he's been rescued, by the PCs in this series of adventures, and he continues to sort of be a patron type of as a patron relationship with the characters. So in the chat, I'm just seeing from sci-fi, or sci-fi, actually, I guess is how you pronounce that. It's a pretty long distance. It is a long distance, but for me, it makes sense. Like, I think the thing to do is that Balin very occasionally, like maybe not even once a year, might make a trek over towards the Blue Mountains. He does have wanderlust. I mean, this is made kind of quite clear when it's talks about him as a patron, that he loves going out and wandering around the kind of northern Middle Earth. So he will spend a lot of time in court, but he's also quite old, and I think it seems to me like it works. I like the idea of Balin being connected both to my hometown and to the area that I'm probably going to be adventuring around in. But most of the dwarves that he'll be talking to, or that he'll be dealing with when he's going over to the Blue Mountains, for example, I can kind of logically in my head make the pieces fit that they're going to be mostly concerned with dwarven crises if he comes across any, if he needs help with anything, and that the dwarves there are only going to kind of be interested in helping out for things that are going to that they're directly involved in. If he's seeing some other things, that's where, which, the dwarves might not be directly connected with, that's where perhaps he can be a patron who is, he's fond of Bilbo, having adventured with him. He's fond of we can say that he's fond of the Men of Dale, and maybe he's taken me under his wing at some point. So we can kind of all carry that over into my backstory and say that for whatever reason, I can come up with a reason later, but I kind of like the idea of Balin being my patron. So that's what I'm going to go with. It opens up the door a lot more to treating this game a little bit along the lines of Forbidden Lands, which is kind of what I originally wanted to do with it. And I couldn't really see that happening with Tom Bombadil being my patron. So I'm a bit happier with this change, mainly because Tom Bombadil, I had a look at Fellowship of the Ring where he's introduced, and he's just really only focused on the Old Forest on the outskirts of the Shire, and anything that happens beyond that is really kind of not so interesting for him. So it kind of doesn't, it puts up a few kind of stumbling blocks for adventuring in the wider, outside of the Old Forest, when Tom Bombadil as a patron is really, as a kind of quest giver, if you will, is not really going to be all that bothered about things that are happening outside of his borders. Whereas Balin is kind of this, wandering dwarf with a lot of connections and concerned about how things are going. Obviously, if the roads aren't safe, he's gonna know about that because he's traveling them. He's gonna be hearing rumors from all over the place. So it seems like a really good kind of mobile patron to be able to do these things. Then it brings up some other issues, which are, well, the main issue is my safe haven, because if I keep Dale as my safe haven, that's going to cause issues with me wanting to adventure where second edition is taking place, which is not on that side of the Misty Mountains. It's on the western side of the Misty Mountains, and particularly kind of the northern. Well, anyway, that whole area kind of needs to be my playground, so I can't really have a safe haven there. Rivendell doesn't really make a lot of sense with having a dwarf. I mean, I can have a look and see if maybe he's one of those few dwarves that has a good relationship with elves, but I kind of like the idea of Bree being my safe haven, and it's also recommended in the second edition core rulebook, so that's what I'm going to be going with. I have a safe haven, I have a kind of a home base at the Prancing Pony, which is a bit cliche, but it works. So yeah, my safe haven is going to be in Bree at the Prancing Pony. Balin. I need to figure out exactly how his name is pronounced because I'm probably going to be saying it a lot. But I'm going to say Balin for now. He's going to be my patron, and I will probably be getting messages from him from time to time. So he'll be leaving, just like with Gandalf, leaving messages with the innkeeper, which I think was Butterbur from memory. Balin's going to be doing something similar for me. So that's what it's going to be about. And I wouldn't have kind of made that connection, which has kind of really opened things up a lot for me in my head, if I hadn't have taken a look at some of these, just the simple kind of starting blurbs from the first edition adventure books. So I'm going to continue that. I'm going to be looking at potential starting adventure, like a starting adventure hook for how I'm going to start my adventure. I'm going to be looking at potential other things, encountery type of things that I might be able to start populating tables with. Little things like that. And if there's some really juicy tidbits that I really want to deep dive into, then I might do that, have a look and see what's in the first edition books anyway, and also in the starter set for second edition. So yeah, I'm gonna go back over to my PDF here, and we're gonna start looking at this. So I think the first place to start really is heading over to the starter set for second edition. In the starter set, there are 3 booklets, and one of those 3 booklets, so one is basically like a cut-down version of the rules, one is a setting guide about the Shire, and the third is this adventure book. Now, I'm aware, having had a look at this previously, that this is very kind of Hobbit-centric, and as a result, I'm not sure how much of this is going to be relevant to me, because as you can see here, I don't know how legible this is, but really it's set in and around parts of the Shire. And my plan is, in fact, I'm going to skip over here to the second edition core rulebook, go to the chapter about the world, and see if I can find a big map. No, the map is at the front of the book. Here. Okay. So if we kind of zoom in on this a bit. So Bree is here right in the center. Yeah. The Shire's over here. This is the old forest where Tom Bombadil is. The Barrow Downs, which are obviously where Frodo and co almost meet their ends with the Barrow Wights. And yeah, this is kind of the area up here, I think. The Lone Lands, the Enten Moors, Ruador, however you pronounce that, Fornost, the ruins of Anuminas. These are kind of all the areas I'm going to be kind of wandering around in. The Trollshaws as well, probably over towards Rivendell, but maybe not going. I mean, it might be going to Rivendell as well, sure. But kind of all this area around here, kind of in the north, I imagine, is going to be an area. Look, this is the old witch realm of Angmar. There's going to be a lot of like goblins and all sorts of nasties out there. Here are the Blue Mountains, which is where I was saying the Hall of the Dwarves. This is where Balin's going to be kind of following the road through here, and then crossing overland to the Hall of the Dwarves. So he's kind of be coming through Bree every time he's traveling through, I think. He could also take a northern route across the top here and come down, but I think that's much more remote and not very comfortable. And he's an old dwarf. He probably doesn't, he's past his adventuring days where he wants to kind of sleep rough every single night, travel really over quite rough terrain. So that's kind of the area I'm looking at. And for this then, looking at the starter set really isn't kind of going anywhere this direction. It's kind of really, really focused just in this area here in the Shire, right? And so I don't think, I'm just going to have a quick skim of it, but I don't really think it's going to be anything that I need here. So opening it up, we've got this first one here, Conspiracy Most Cracked. You can see from the map here that it's really focused around Waymeet here in Tookland, Mitchell Delving down there, Hobbiton up here. And if we kind of skip past that, lots of hobbits and things. Then we go here, North Expert Treasure Hunters is the next adventure. This takes place more in the North Farthing, which is where we adventured when we did a previous kind of mini campaign on the channel last year. Then we've got Most Excellent Fireworks. We've got the Hills of Scary. So this is kind of coming back down. Hobbiton's kind of over here, I think, from memory. And this is kind of going off east towards the old forest. So again, very, very much in the Shire. And here we've got what looks okay. Tookland. So it's going a little bit further south of the main road. Hobbiton's up here. I think this is Mitchell Delving over there. And then To Sue the Savage Beast looks like heading into the old forest, which is kind of cool. And that's it. We got the epilogue. So that's nothing really for what I'm looking for here. That then leads me to looking at some of the first edition stuff. And there's a couple of things we could look at. So I'm just going to show you what I've got open here. I've got the Darkening of Mirkwood, which is the big campaign book set in and around Mirkwood. So it's probably not going to be super applicable for what I'm looking for. We have this one here, Ruins of the North. This is probably the one that I'm going to be using most. And then we have here Tales from Wilderland. And Wilderland is the space of land that's on the other side of the Misty Mountain, mostly kind of going up between the Misty Mountain and Mirkwood. And so that's there could be some stuff in here that I could probably pull out, but maybe not so much. And then last, I've got here open the Laughter of Dragons, which, as I said before, is set in and around Erebor, or the Lonely Mountain. So I'm not going to look at the Darkening of Mirkwood because I think this is very much a kind of an epic campaign. It's very much set in and around Mirkwood. From what I know, I haven't really done a deep dive into it at all. But from what I understand, it's set all around, Mirkwood, and that's not exactly where I want to be adventuring. So if we look at Ruins of the North, then as a start, we can see here that there are once again 6 adventures. And it's saying here, the first adventure takes the companions from the foothills of Gundabad across the Misty Mountains to the former capital of Angmar, and finally to Rivendell itself. Now, if we want to find where these places are, Gundabad, I believe, is, from memory, where are we? Oh, man. I mean, it's on the other side of the Misty Mountains, I believe. I'm just not 100% sure. It's not going to be in there, of course. It might be in a map here for the Darkening of Mirkwood. I just don't know if I can find a map very quickly off the top of my head. It'd be nice. It probably would have been good to have a map prepared here. Region map. Of course, it's sideways. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Where was I? Ruins. So we go across the Misty Mountains to the former capital city of Angmar. If we look at where Angmar is, then in here, Angmar. Where was Angmar? Up here somewhere, wasn't it? I recognize the name Angmar. I just can't find it. So I'm gonna just nip over to Google and type in Angmar Middle Earth, just to see where that is exactly, rather than kind of hunting for pixels around here. Oh, it's right up here at the top, of course. The Old Witch Realm of Angmar. So this whole realm at the top here, I think, is what it's talking about there. So, yeah. So heading over the Misty Mountains over to this area at the start, so very much like the Ruins of the North, as it says. And then it says kind of heading down to Rivendell as well. That's fine. I'm not necessarily interested in that element of it. But it's saying here, we're set in the various lands surrounding the Vale of Imladris, and the Vale of Imladris is where Rivendell sits. So this, I think this whole vale here is, or is it here? I'm not sure exactly where that vale is, but I think, yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna type that in as well. Vale of Imladris. Okay, it's just saying, it's just coming up with Rivendell. Okay, it's like a valley. I guess it's the valley here between these two rivers, perhaps. Anyway, so just kind of the area around there. So this is kind of really where this takes place. So if we read, I'm just going to read through the blurbs here of the 6 adventures, which is only these 6 paragraphs here. A company of heroes, so Nightmares of Angmar. A company of heroes embark on a desperate mission to recover the stolen children of the Black Hills from the goblins who took them. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting starting hook, right? We've got children who have been taken by goblins. It's also kind of dark, so I'm just going to write these down. So children abducted by goblins. Okay. They must find safe passage through snow and peril into the mountains of Angmar and the ruined city of Carndum. Now, Carndum, we did see here on the map, is right at the top here, so that's kind of cool. So we have some leads, maybe, that they might have been taken to Carndum. Or maybe something to do with that. I'm not sure what that means exactly. How I'm going to fit that into a kind of adventure starter, or a campaign starter. Yeah. So we gotta, you know, this adventure is heading into this old area of Angmar, the old empire of Angmar. Was it empire? realm, the old realm of Angmar. Oh man, I gotta close Darken and Mark would keep going to it accidentally. Yeah, as the enemy there seeks to poison their minds against one another, they must flee in the company of Glorfindel to seek sanctuary in Rivendell. Okay. Then, harder than stone, a fearsome servant of Sauron has arrived in Eriador to rally the trolls to the service of his dark master. The heroes set out to find out more about this ogre captain and discover both a sinister plot and an unlikely ally, a spirit bound to the will of Sauron, but who would dearly like to escape. Ah, that's interesting too. So, servant of Sauron rallying trolls. Concerning archers, Bilbo, at Rivendell, researching his book in the company of Glorfindel and Lindare, asks the heroes to search the ruins of the north to prove that there really was a regiment of hobbit archers that marched to fight in the Battle of Fornost. Fornost is, again, one of the places over here, right here, so just north of Bree. That could be a nice place to start, actually, and then maybe we head from there off in this direction. That might be a good kind of starter, actually, to head off to Fornost. Yeah, where was I? To do so, they must search a forgotten battlefield and enter a long-abandoned ruin, all the while contending with spirits, orcs, and ghosts of the past. Okay. So, rumors of hobbit archers who fought at Fornost. True. And that could be interesting because I could have a companion with me. I could have not Bilbo, but maybe a I could kind of extrapolate from this that there is a hobbit from Bree, maybe, who's kind of interested. Maybe someone who's Bilbo has come back. He's come back to the Shire after having adventured, to the Lonely Mountain with all of his wealth. And while we know from the Fellowship of the Ring that he didn't really have a very popular time there, we're reading that he's kind of going to and fro with to Rivendell, and maybe there are some hobbits in Bree, because Bree does have some city hobbits, and maybe some of the city hobbits aren't quite as stuck in their ways as the more kind of rural Shire hobbits, and maybe there's one of them that is has been quite excited about Bilbo's tale and wants to go investigate. So he could maybe hire me as like an adventuring human to take him up to do some research up there. So that could be an interesting kind of NPC as a companion that I've got that's going to be basically useless in a fight, which could be quite fun. The company of the Wain, the heroes cross paths with an itinerant group of tinkers and traders selling their wares to the scattered folk of Eriador. But the traders are not what they seem. Their leader is an agent of the White Hand gathering information for Saruman. Okay. That's more like a faction type of thing, or that's a good encounter, actually. So, itinerant peddlers secretly spies for Saruman. Cool. What lies beneath? The company join a ranger, Hiravel, on his quest to reclaim his ancestral home in the ruins of Arthedain, crossing paths with a group of bandits who might not be all that they first appear. Let's see where this Arthedain is. Arthedain, is that somewhere I can find easily? Ah, okay. So Arthedain, is a region including the Shire. Oh, here, it says here, Arthedain. But this apparently goes all the way up to Fornost, so this whole region in here is kind of Arthedain. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So, in the ruins of Arthedain, I don't see a place named. Was there a named place? I don't see one. I guess I'd have to look into that a bit deeper to see if there's a place there. Maybe there's a ruin. It says the ruins of Arthedain. An ancient ancestor still resides within the holding, a specter who seeks to corrupt Hiravel's bloodline forever. Okay. So, Ranger seeks to reclaim ancestral home in Arthedain. Okay. And last but not least on here, we've got Shadows over Tirn Gorthad, or Gortad. The Barrow Wights are slipping beyond the edge of the Barrow Downs for the first time in centuries, and the heroes must help Gandalf the Grey restore them to their tombs. Okay. So, the Barrow Wights are a wandering. Okay. Yeah, okay. And we got here a little call-out box. The Return of the Witch King. While the adventures found in Ruins of the North are all standalone, they do form a thematic story arc in their own way. That of the rise of the Shadow and the return of the Witch King to Angmar in readiness for the War of the Ring. As the players play each adventure, they should find themselves more and more troubled by this growing threat, fearful of the future and what is to come. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So we have this, increasing threat as time goes on. And maybe there's, I don't know what's going to be in Strider mode, but there could be the opportunity to have some sort of a threat tracker, which is something I've looked at for my own games. And if it's not in Strider mode, then maybe it's something that, I can kind of just tack on here as a sort of, I plan to have like a journal in Foundry, which is tracking plots, and that could be an element of it. As the players play each adventure, they should find them, as I've said that already. Unlike in other campaigns, there's no chance of a denouement or a climax where the bad guy is bested. Such a victory over the Shadow remains a distant, impossible dream that will not live long enough to see. You may think this premise gloom-laden and dour, and you would be right to do so, but have heart that the actions of heroes can still have an impact, and mayhap their victories combined will afford their people respite against the Shadow. Okay. Alright. I think that's probably a good place to start here. So looking at this whole thing, and bearing in mind that my safe haven is going to be in in Bree, I think from just looking at those, the best place to start is to maybe head off towards Fornost. And in the company of a companion, so I'll be taking a hobbit with me. And yeah, we're going to be investigating rumors of hobbit archers. So we're going to probably be kind of poking around an ancient battlefield. I guess looking for evidence of hobbit-sized bows. We're going to be looking for hobbity remains, maybe, that sort of thing. And, it's kind of a grim task. But as the adventure kind of alludes to, there's all sorts of things that can happen there. So what I will do is I'll probably look at this Concerning Archers adventure to start off with. And I will probably see if there are things like... I gotta think about this, actually. What I don't want to do is I don't want to just take an existing adventure, read through the whole thing, make a bunch of scenes that happen in the published adventure, and then kind of make them happen during my solo playthrough. I want to kind of make it sandboxy, and I only want to use this as a kicking off point. But I think there is stuff I can glean from this. So making things like looking at what I'm going to be encountering in and around Fornost, I can make an encounter table, for example, and things like that. So that's kind of what I'm going to be. That's kind of what I'm going to be looking at. So I'm going to quickly jump over to that section, and to do that, because the table of contents on the side, which you can't see, is not super helpful here. It's not nested. It's just a huge long list of, I don't know how, probably 200 bookmarks. So I'm going to do the old-fashioned way. I'm going to go to the table of contents, Concerning Archers, page 61. I'm going to come down, which again you can't see, type in 61 at the bottom, and boom, there we are. So... it begins in Rivendell. Well, no, it's going to begin in Bree. What? We're asked to travel to the ruins of Fornost and search for evidence that hobbits participated in a great battle, despite the lack of historical records. Okay. And maybe Bilbo is interested in doing this, but he doesn't have the time. And this hobbit is very keen to do this research for Bilbo to kind of get into his good graces. So yeah, that's probably what I'm going with. And then who? Gishak Gashnaga, an orc chieftain from Mount Gram, is digging his underground realm under the North Downs. Okay, that's interesting. Where are the North Downs? Up here. Okay. All right. So we've got an orc chieftain who is possibly going to be around there. Which, you know, doing this kind of meta, I don't know about that, but it's kind of maybe a threat that we can have lurking in the background, and that's a reason why there are going to be goblins, orcs, maybe some trolls kind of lurking around that area. So the adventuring phase. And here we've got, if you look here, we've got the adventure split into 4 parts with an epilogue. And this is going to be important as well, because what I want to do here is look at the kind of... So I'm basically just skimming the introduction for this adventure first. And I'm just kind of I'm very much aware of time as well. And what I don't want to do is I don't want this video to go on for too long. So I'm probably going to stop here and just talk a little bit afterwards about, you know, what I'm going to be doing in Foundry then, to prep for this starting bit. Again, because I don't know what's going to be coming in Strider mode. And yeah, and that'll probably be it for tonight. So, part 1, Riddles in Rivendell. The company is drawn into a scholarly debate between Bilbo Baggins and Lindir. No, I'm probably going to start more in media res on the road to Fornost, so we could ignore that. Part 2, The Dead and the Lost. In Fornost, the company begins their search for signs of the legendary Hobbit archers. But the land has been long under the taint of shadow, and the companions may find that the past does not always rest easily. Okay, that's really good. So, the land is tainted, and the past does not always rest easily. So I mean, that's heavily implying specters and ghosts and that sort of thing, which is great. Or, you know, wights, I guess, what they might be called here. Part 3, Into Darkness. We investigate the Hall of Erendur, where they encounter dangerous and spectral relics from the past. Okay, so there's a dungeon, effectively. I'm not so keen on dungeons, especially not in solo. They can be pretty deadly, and frankly, dungeons have never appealed to me in role-playing. So we may or may not actually go into there, but we'll see. And part 4, The Last Battle of the Green Company. The company is attacked by Gishak, the new ruler underground Fornost. But the companions are not alone, and with the aid of Rufus Took and the Green Company, they can win the day. Okay, so we've got a bit of Deus Ex Machina happening here. Okay, interesting. An epilogue, Bringers of Tidings. So it looks like Rufus Took and the Green Company are... Oh, right. We can choose to lay him to rest. So I guess that's kind of implying that the specters of these Hobbit archers kind of help save the day. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll see. I might take that on board. Might not. We'll see about that. So effectively, that's what I'm looking at. So there's some interesting things coming up here. I've got an idea for what I want to be doing, how I'm going to be starting. I've got to come up with a Hobbit companion to come with me, who's going to be an academic sort of type and not much of a help at all in a fight, but might be a good balance to my character, who is going to be kind of a young, headstrong sort of adventurer out to make his name and seek glory. Sorry, just looking at the chat, because I've been kind of got my nose stuck in this PDF. Mr. Dinjavel, what book is this? I'm looking at Ruins of the North from first edition of The One Ring. Yeah, so basically, I've got a really good starting point, I think. I've got a good hook to go over to Fornost, and I've got some things to investigate there. I'm hoping this adventure, which I've just found, is going to have plenty of juicy details that I can extract from it and populate in a sort of encounter table in and around that area. I like the idea that there's this bigger threat of an orc chieftain there as well, so I'm definitely going to steal that and put that in there. Whether or not I'm going to be adventuring down into the... yeah, we'll see. I mean, see what happens. I think I'll probably pull a lot of the elements of this out and kind of populate a bit of a sandbox in and around Fornost, take it from there. And then after that, I think it's really probably in my prep between sessions, if I end up doing some stuff around Fornost and kind of tidying all that little adventure arc up, There'll probably be a bit of downtime where I'll be kind of resting and looking for other things that might happen. Maybe there'll be some fallout from what I've learned there that will lead to some other adventures, etc., etc. The usual type of thing. And I'm hoping that Strider mode that's going to be coming out will have a lot of tips on, continuing. Well, I don't know yet, but hopefully it's going to have a lot of content in there to help drive adventures and drive the narrative from whatever I've done starting in Fornost. So we'll have to wait and see. But from my perspective, this was a good exercise going through the Ruins of the North adventure supplement, having a look at what the adventures are, thinking of them in the terms of having a starting adventure hook with something that can happen, which can then lead into more adventure. And I like the idea of having a companion as well, because it always makes things much more interesting. So yeah, I'm off to a good start, I think. I'm going to leave it here. I'm not going to go any further looking into any of the other adventuring books or talking any more about the adventure, because I think I want to wait for Strider mode to really flesh out potential, like how I'm going to be approaching this adventure. I've got an adventure hook, and I don't want to do much more than that necessarily. So what I will be doing is I will be reading, as I said, more about Fornost from this supplement and kind of starting to get my head around that, maybe coming up with an encounter table around the area. But not a lot more than that, because I don't want to kind of contradict what's going to be coming out in Strider mode. So that's me for this video. In 2 weeks' time, the plan is to do another live stream about Foundry. So if you're more interested in Foundry than in this sort of stuff I'm doing now, and how to get Foundry set up for the One Ring, don't miss it. I am kind of not going to be doing it like I have done in the past, long 3-hour, 4-hour live streams where I'm basically just going through Foundry and putting in a lot of legwork. What I'm going to be doing instead is I'm going to be talking about so I'm going to be doing the first of maybe a series of Foundry videos prepping for this. And it's going to be things like looking at, modules, what if there are any extra modules I think I want to use, getting them set up. I mean, I've already done this already. There's a Foundry video for the One Ring where I start looking at that sort of stuff. And I'll be talking about getting Foundry prepped for running a game as well, because we don't have a premium module. We won't be getting a premium module for the One Ring 2nd edition. So while there is a Foundry module to play with it, all of the information like NPCs, foes, random tables, character elements, all of these things are not in there. They have to be manually put in. There's no way I'm going to be able to share that with anyone else, because that specific stuff is covered by copyright and therefore can't be shared. That's why we aren't getting a premium module. So it's going to be more looking at how to get those set up, showing how I've set them up, because I already have done a lot of the legwork for our campaign that we ran last year. So I'm going to be so I don't have to do all that hours and hours of work again. I'm going to be taking that and just using it in a new Foundry instance. So I'll be kind of showcasing what we've done there again, and then talking about how to start looking at roll tables and macros for solo use. Mainly because I've done a lot of that recently, and I've been using Foundry for solo stuff on this channel a fair amount now. And the thing that makes it interesting for solo play is being able to create macros based on random tables, where at the click of a button I can get basically an Oracle result. And that is really, really powerful. It's really good to have, and that's relatively easy to set up. So it's probably going to be a quick overview of, how Well, I have to think about this. I might have to split it up into multiple videos. One looking at, but I've already done a video on this, so we'll have to see. We'll have to see exactly how to do this. I need to do some investigation into what my previous video talked about and whether it's all still valid for the current version of Foundry and the current version of the module, and then also look at macros and roll tables and that sort of thing, which is what I wanted to go to next with the previous video that I did. So I need to have a little think about that. But regardless, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be starting to get my hands, my hands dirty with Foundry, and that might be a number of videos in length. If Strider mode has still not been released. After I kind of wrap up as much as I can do with Foundry, then I might be looking at other content while we're waiting for Strider mode to come out. And I'm hoping Strider mode is going to be out within sort of a couple of months. I don't know if it's going to be, but it's been a little while now, and I'm just hoping that that Kickstarter backers, which I'm one of, will be getting like a beta version of it or eyes on it, hopefully, in the next couple of months. If that doesn't happen, then I'll figure out something else. But that's it for me for tonight's stream. Thank you very much for those of you who joined me in the chat. And if you did like this video, please hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe button, as it really does help the channel to grow. And if you've got any comments, you got any ideas on maybe maybe there's some other supplements on Fornost I can look into. There might be like an old MERP supplement I can look into for Fornost that might have a bunch of adventure tables and things like that. That could be a good place to look. I think the MERP line are on Drive-Thru-RPG as PDFs. I'll have to look into that. I'm definitely not going to be buying like old MERP supplements because they are pretty expensive these days. But yeah, I'll have a little look at these sorts of things. Other places I can find random tables. If you've got any comments on any of this sort of stuff, you've got some tips on where I can look, by all means, drop them in the comments below. And yeah, thanks very much. Catch you next time.